and his his answer was yeah, if you don't get annoyed at your mother anymore, you can be really sure that your awakening is profoundly deep. Let's see. Does anyone know who Raquel's AI note taker is? I don't know whether to approve it or decline it, but probably decline. Sorry. But this will be recorded. It will definitely be recorded. All right, everyone. So yeah. All right. Means abandon ship. Okay. All right. Welcome. So I'm gonna spotlight myself and then I'll get started here. The spotlight just means that when the recording happens, it just shows my face. So don't worry about being on the recording. So you can keep your camera on if you like. So.
Recording in progress.
All right, so for today, what we're gonna do. This is our first Sunday sit that we've had in, like a year. We used to sit on Sunday. A few of you here have sat with me for, I think, 4 years now, and the rest of you are new. So welcome. Happy to have all of you. I'll introduce a little bit about myself since you're all new. Most of you came from the Angelo interview, so you got a bit of my background, but I can get more into my teaching style and exactly how we go about things here. So if you haven't yet, there's a class on the channel that was from 2 or 3 weeks ago called 3-mode awareness, and that gives you a pretty clear picture on how exactly the practice is approached. So to recap, with 3-mode awareness, all meditation techniques can be divided into these 3 categories. Techniques that use the body or use the breath, mantra, visualization. The attention is directed this way, so it's directed outward. All practices that are known as self-inquiry, or called things like the inward turn or inward looking, those are mode 2 practices in my approach. So that means that the mind is being directed at itself. Attention is being directed at itself. So the direction is this way. And in mode 3, you just don't try anything. You just completely drop all effort, all contrivance. You drop any doing. And mode 3 is subtle in the sense that for a beginner, or if your mind is pretty, even if the hindrances are just really strong, you have a lot of meditation in your background, but that particular sit, the hindrances or the obstacles in meditation are very, very strong. Your mind's pretty chaotic. Your attention's going all over the place. It's difficult to do mode 3. You sit there and like you're just spinning in thought. Even though you're not trying to do anything, it's more like this just phantasmagoria of mental content. So to get more info on that, just go to the channel and you can find 3-mode awareness. But today we'll do pointing out. So I had the good fortune of learning from really incredible teachers in my life. Chogyal Namkhai Norbu, the Dzogchen teacher, was one of them. I met him in 2012, and I think I was 18 or 19 at the time. And the story is, so he gave the direct introduction to the natural state. So where Dzogchen practice begins, where Zen begins, where Vedanta begins is essentially a recognition of your own mind. So a recognition of consciousness itself. And everything goes from that point onward. So the teacher will give various explanations to help us have that recognition of our own nature of consciousness. And so Namkhai Norbu did this, and it was a lecture. And then at the end, he does something called the Ati Guru Yoga transmission, where everyone does a specific visualization. They visualize the Tibetan A or the Tibetan Ah in their chest, and everyone goes like ah, and they all just are in presence together with the teacher, with the guru who's also doing it. So this is how that specific transmission is given in his system. And so that occurred, and then he explained this whole nature of the mind thing, and I had this idea that, because when you read the Dzogchen text, it sounds like if you just go and meet the guru and he gives you the transmission, like you awaken right on the spot. And so he gave the transmission, did the whole talk, explained everything. And then at the end of the workshop or the class, you're able to just go up to him and say thank you and ask him any questions. So there's this big line, and I wait, and then I get up to him and I say, Rinpoche, did I do something wrong? And he's like, what do you mean? And I said, you gave the transmission, but nothing happened. And he started laughing, and he said, just keep practicing. So I was expecting that this like lightning bolt of awakening was supposed to hit me the moment I met this great teacher, and nothing happened. And for some reason, he came back to LA the next year in a city in the northern part of Los Angeles called Pasadena, and they rented out this auditorium. And this particular retreat, he was giving more of the lung and the transmission. So lung are it's like for you to do certain practices in the Tibetan tradition, the seeds that connect you to the deities for those practices need to be they need to be given to you or implanted into you through the guru or through the teacher. So that's a lung. Like So you could do Kala Chakra or the 6 yogas of Naropa on your own, but if you don't have the lung, you don't have the specific link to the lineage for that practice that was given to you by the master, then it's like you might have results, you might not. It's not as ironclad. And in the Tibetan tradition, they recommend that you don't even try a practice if you haven't gotten the lung or the transmission for it. So he's giving out a bunch of transmission and explaining more about the nature of mind and explaining more about presence. And at the end of the 3 days, we get question time with him, and I went up to him and I asked him, how do you realize the nature of mind? And he just looked at me. He just stared into my eyes and he said, how do you feel now? And I said, I feel present. And he said, now relax. And I said, that's it? And he's like, yeah, that's it. And I said, okay. So, something happened in that moment, but it wasn't necessarily understood. 7 years later, after like forever of meditation, daily practice, and all of this spiritual rat race thing, like the spiritual hamster wheel, I went through so many cycles of, God, what am I doing? I just want to give this up. Stop, please. Can't take it anymore. But I kept practicing. I couldn't, I was obsessed. I couldn't get away from it. And then one day I read the lines from Talks by Ramana Maharshi that said, moksha, liberation, is to know that you were never born. And started shaking and trembling. I didn't understand what was happening. I was on a plane when I read that phrase. And then the weirdness of that, reading that line passed, and I landed in LA, and the next day I was driving to work, and just out of nowhere on the 5 northbound, separation and duality just vanished. I couldn't tell where my hands ended and where the car began. All the people on the freeway in their cars, it was like my heart like reached through space and time and was like appearing as theirs. All of our hearts were these nodes in this web, in this network, and my chest just cracked open and I just started laughing. I couldn't stop laughing. And I understood what Master Norbru said to me in that moment 7 years later. So that was the beginning of the all of this, I would say. When awakening happens, whatever form or stage of it occurs, the characteristic mark of awakening is that you awaken from your previous form of identification. So for me, in that instance, I had identified as a person in time. I had identified as a practitioner. I had identified as a meditator. Like when people would ask me, hey, what do you do? I would actually say, hey, I'm a meditator. Like, of all things, I'd say I'm a meditator. And I remember one person pointed out, like, I've never heard anyone say that. It's such a weird statement. This was back in 2011, before all this stuff became so popular. And yeah, so I identified as a practitioner, identified as a person in time, identified as my body, identified as thoughts, identified as feelings, identified as dreams. Where it was that I wanted to go in time and the things that I wanted to do. So I had this big, I had these big ideas about what awakening was going to be like, and that I get all these superpowers and whatever. So just fantasies about what this is or what it would be like, and what you'd be able to do afterwards. And when that moment came, my whole life vanished. It was just zapped, like incinerated. And the depth and the clarity, the clarity and power of that presence that dawned in that moment was so clear. It was so overwhelming. It was so expansive, that unity consciousness. I was not able to ever identify as a person after that day. So the continuity of the state, only like the continuity of the presence and that clarity only remained for 10 days. So imagine, you have a really good meditation, or you can think of your really good meditations or times you've been on retreat where you're noticing, or your mindfulness becomes continuous, maybe for that hour. So this was like so aware, so awake that I didn't need to sleep. I only had to sleep 2 hours a night, and when I did sleep, all this strange OBE stuff was happening. So the uninterrupted nature of presence, attention was not deviating from that anymore at all. So attention is a conditioned phenomena. There's something behind it. So why do some things capture your attention more than other things? Just because certain things you have interest in. Certain things are more sticky to your particular mind body. So notice how if you engage in the topics that you're deeply, deeply interested in, it's very hard to actually be continuously mindful when you're engaging in those topics. It's like your attention just goes straight into it, doesn't have a sense of being aware, or there's no sense of being aware. So this reaching thing that the mind does, it's craving, clinging. The mind is, we're always reaching for something, always trying to reach for something, and then once we have it, we want to make it last. We don't want it to go away. So this reaching nature is really, really what is the driver behind the shifting of attention. So when that reaching nature is not present, as a byproduct, the attention stops doing this. So if you go on a meditation retreat, and depends on your skill as a meditator, but it could happen within the first day, the third day, by the fifth day, this reaching thing, it gets calmed and suppressed essentially by the degree of stillness and the intensity of the practice. So there's less of this happening, and the mind is quiet because it's not engaging with so many objects. It's not doing so many things. You're not very busy. You're not busy at all on retreat. So by the fifth day, you're pretty quiet. You notice, your mind, your attention doesn't wander very much. So the reason for that is because this is not happening as much. In that 10 days of opening, that thing was just like almost non-existent. So naturally, as a result, it was just like basking in the glory of the Lord continuously. The issue is that many of us have had these big openings, whether they were naturally from meditation, or on meditation retreats, or through plant medicine, or Out-of-body experiences can give you glimpses or states of cosmic consciousness and unity, things like this. The challenge, though, is that there's a relationship between experience, insight, and realization. So when the non-dual openings happen, that constitutes as experience. Like, it's an experience that we were having. That's why it happened, and then it passed. The door opened, and the door closed. There was unity consciousness for a couple hours, and then it went away. So the openings could last longer, or they could be deeper. But unless there's insight that occurs in those openings, there's hardly ever a result of a permanent state or a permanent shift. The reason being is there has to be an opening combined with an insight in order for you to wake up out of the grosser or previous form of identification. Like, if you're convinced that you're the body, if you're convinced that you're a person in time, if you're convinced that you are what you think, you have to experience something so deep that the understanding that you're not those things occurs. That is what I mean by insight. The experience is so deep that you could never, ever, ever think that you were anything other than this again. Sure, you'll slip up, you'll make mistakes, you might go off on the rails. You'll still have your reactions, and you'll still have your preferences, unless you really had a deep blowout and your personality structure is just completely gone and you don't have any craving remaining. That does happen to people. It just seems to be particularly rare. So the experience, the opening, in combination with the insight, with the understanding of the nature of that state or the nature of experience itself, is what leads to awakening or realization. So you can have many non-dual experiences, you can have many experiences of unity consciousness, but unless there's the understanding into the nature of what is arising, then it'll just be something that comes and goes. So in my case, I was fortunate in the sense that the opening was for so long. When the opening lasts 10 days, I mean, how could you'd have to be really, really blind to not see that, oh, okay, I'm not the body, I'm not thought, I'm not feeling, I'm that which experiences it. I'm consciousness. So this is the initial awakening that occurred to me. It was what I call I am everything. You have the sense that you're not what arises, you're this background, you're this consciousness upon which everything arises on. And later that gets deconstructed, and that background that has been realized also collapses. So the awakening for most people is gradual. But one of the first places to get clear on, or one of the first grounds, is this sense of this recognition of consciousness. So that is ascertained by mode 2. Our attention's always going into object. It's always going into things. It's always preoccupied with situations and conditions. And prior to awakening, you really do have the sense of being an experiencer. You do have the sense of something behind here upon which everything is happening to. There's a clear sense that experience and being are two separate things. there's me or this being, and then there's everything that happens. Experience is happening to the being. Initially, this being is conceived to be a separate individual identity that is thought, the body, feeling, memory, perception. So we have the sense that what is happening to us. It's happening to this being that is me. So then that shifts to this sense of me in regarding to being gets thin. It gets thinner, it dissolves as a result of your practice or as a result of understanding. Like what I'm saying, it may make sense to you, and that may cause some things to click. So there comes a disidentification from being me or being my personality. So in mode 2, you're noticing all self-inquiry practices are for the purpose of noticing the experiencer or noticing consciousness itself. When you say, who is dragging this corpse around? What was my face before I was born? Or what am I, right? I think who's a loaded question. When you say who, it sounds like you're going to find a person. But when you say, what am I? All those koans or all of those self-inquiry questions or methods, they only serve one purpose, which is to turn inward and look at the consciousness, to look at what we experience as beingness. Ramana Maharshi refers to this as the self with a capital S. In Be As You Are, he says the self is another word for awareness. Awareness is the self. So in mode 2, you're becoming aware of awareness. And this is also what Rupert's spirit teaches and many of the people in the Vedanta scene. So the idea first is to get a recognition of awareness. And so we all do this now. I want all of you to be aware now. Be aware. Okay, we're aware now, okay? All right? Everyone's aware. If this didn't make sense, email me and we'll go through the particulars. So now we're all aware. We're all present now. 5 minutes ago when I was talking, we were not aware. Probably most of us were not aware. So I'm going to distinguish between consciousness and awareness, okay? So to be conscious, it means this is the opposite of being asleep. Like if you're sleeping, you're not conscious, okay? Right now, we're conscious. So awareness is the recognition of being conscious. There's an actual awake clarity to this consciousness. So when I say be aware, it means that there is recognition of this. You're actually aware now. 5 minutes ago, you weren't. 10 minutes ago, you weren't. You're distracted. You're listening to what I'm saying. But now we're aware. All right. So this is what Namkhai Norbu meant to me when he said, "How do you feel?" And I said, "Present." And then he said, "Okay, now just relax." So to be aware is the essence. When you're aware, you do mode 1, right? Or you do mode 2. Or you do mode 3. But they're modes of awareness. They're modes of this, of being aware of this. So the essence of practice is to just be in this noticing, to be in awareness as much as you can. Initially, you only have a few seconds of it a day. Later, you get a few minutes On retreat, you'll get a few hours. If you're a fully enlightened Buddha, you never depart from this, not even in dreaming and not even in sleep. This aware, this being awake. How the stages of awakening progress is that we investigate into the nature of this awareness. In I Am Everything, you discover this. And the discovery of it, the abiding in it, becomes so deep that disidentification from form, the body, and thought occurs. In the later stages, investigation into the nature of awareness, you find that awareness is not actually something that stands apart. It's not this screen. When you look for awareness, you find nothing other than what appears. So, like dreams and dreaming, I know many of you have already heard this, especially people on the Wednesday sit, and you've attended a couple classes already. But with dreams, dreaming, dreamer, because of our language, dualistic perceptions, we really have the sense that these are three different things. There is a dreamer, there's dreaming, and then there's the dream. Now, when you're in a dream and you look for the dreamer, which would be you in the dream, what do you find? You find the dream. You find your dream body, you find your dream thoughts, you find your dream mind. Or not, I mean, it's not correct. You don't actually find your dream mind. But you have the sense that your consciousness is in the dream, and that's your dreaming consciousness. Okay? So, dreamer is actually another word for dream. Now let's look at dreaming. What is dreaming? When you look for dreaming, when you look for the phenomena of dreaming itself, you only find the dream. You can't find dreaming apart from the dream. Likewise, when you look for your mind, you don't find anything other than what appears. This is in the later stages. So it becomes very clear that there's actually no separation between you or between mind or between presence and what is appearing. Nothing that happens in a dream. Nothing that happens in a dream. Absolutely nothing. You could be this cosmic deity dreaming hundreds of thousands of worlds simultaneously, and you can have full recall of 500,000 incarnations, collapse the universe, have the universe re-arise countless times. It has no effect on the phenomena of dreaming itself. Nothing that has ever happened in a dream has any effect on the phenomena of dreaming itself. Nothing that you've ever done in your life adds to the phenomena we call mind or experience or takes away from it. You don't get more mind. You see? You don't get more you get more experiences, but you don't get more experience. There's no more or less experience. The only thing that gets more or less is your clarity, your attention. Becomes more continuous, becomes more deep, becomes more penetrative. But experience itself is the same. You've never had an experience outside experience. You've never had an experience outside your mind. Outside of mind. Nothing that ever happens has any effect on the arising and continuity of experience. Period. You don't get more of it, you don't get less of it. It's just where your attention's at. In the Heart Sutra, all dharmas are marked by emptiness. There is neither increasing nor decreasing. There's no increasing of mind. There's no decreasing of mind. There's no increasing of experience. There's no decreasing of experience. Mind and experience are the same thing in the way that I'm discussing it at this moment. So, I introduced a lot of you to Peter Brown already. And I'll explain a couple of the big pointers that I got from Peter before he passed away. This collapse of duality thing already occurred, but it was recommended that I go and sit with someone who's been in an awakening for many decades. So I went and I met Peter Brown in San Jose. Oh, sorry, in someplace in the Bay Area. I'm not remembering it right now. It's just poofed. And anyways, so I talk with Peter, and I tell him, "Hey, so I get presence. I understand this awakeness and this non-duality, blah blah. But I had this near-death experience, and I talked about it in the Angelo interview that many of you watched. So, in that experience, the mind experience appeared as this ocean, infinite ocean, eternity of 10 billion suns. I don't know. It's impossible to describe, but it was literally eternity, infinity, pure light, and you are that. No recollection you ever lived, no recollection you were ever born, no sense of time at all whatsoever. Total. I can't even call it bliss or love. It's just like, it's just the beyond. So I asked Peter about this. I'm like, hey, so like, is that something I should be able to enter? Should be able to cross my legs and enter that? And he was like, now tell me, was or was it not an experience? And I was like, it's definitely an experience. He's like, that's right. Your mind is the Dharmakaya. It appears as all states. It appeared as that ocean of 10 billion suns, the same way that your presence, your nature, is appearing as this room, this conversation right now. He's like, it's the same thing, it just looks different. In that, it is configured, it appears, your nature appears as infinity, eternity, and light. Just infinite light. That's how the nature, that's how mind is configured, or that's how experience is configured in that plane, in these more fundamental levels. Here it's configured as this. It's configured as this room. It's configured as my voice that you're hearing. It's configured as seeing, tasting, sensing, touching, feeling, cognition, thought, memory, perception, intention, attention. All the various aspects of the experiential field. The mind, the nature is appearing as this. In your dreams last night, the nature, your mind appeared as that dream. It appeared as that dream the same way that it appears as this. If you've had experiences of cosmic consciousness or unity consciousness, your mind appeared as cosmic consciousness, as unity consciousness. If you've ever had periods in your life or in your practice where you had this weird spontaneous awakening and then just internal commentary disappeared for 3 months, it just means that that's how the experiential field was configured for those 3 months. Your mind was appearing as that, the same way that it appears as this. Mystical states, silence, satori, bliss, whatever. These are all conditioned phenomena. These are all conditioned states. If you do A, you set up the appropriate conditions, you can experience those things. So some of you have read my dependent origination vision blog post, or you heard about it from ATR when it happened. And people were, it's like a pretty mystical thing that happened on that retreat, where there was seeing into dependent origination, experiencing cessation of perception and feeling, and attaining the recollection of past lives. So, and by that I don't mean like hypnosis, you see these images that come and go. I mean, you actually enter this superstructure of consciousness that I call the mainframe, or at least this happened to me. All your incarnations, all my incarnations appeared on screens, and my attention went like a freaking gun through all of them. In each life, recalling that life, seeing through that person's eyes, feeling their feelings, knowing their thoughts, coming back out, going into another screen, another life, like a Rolodex, a freaking shuffling of incarnations. And the mind appeared as that. Same way it appears as this room. It's like, it's not any different. They're just different configurations of the dream that we call experience. Awakening is just this, waking up from dreaming. You just wake up from conceiving yourself as being anything in particular. When you're in the dream, you don't know that you're dreaming. That's why it's called ignorance. That's why Buddhism says the centerpiece of samsara, of affliction, of the wheel, is ignorance. Because ordinary beings have no idea about the nature of mind. They have no idea about the dream or its mechanics. We understand about the dream from the scientific view. We understand how cells work. We understand these things from our scientific instruments, and of course that's valuable as a human in our condition here. But it doesn't reach the stage where we begin to have this more multi-dimensional understanding, where it becomes very clear that we have been dreaming. We have been asleep. Awakening is only the overturning of avijja, of ignorance, and the realization of wisdom, the realization of awakening. That is literally all that it is. So, on Peter's deathbed, on his deathbed, he gave a 6-minute Dharma talk, and that was it. And he said, people ask me if they should do this practice or do this meditation or take this drug or go here or go there. It doesn't fucking matter. What matters is radiant presence, and that was his word for experience. What matters is the nature of mind. The nature of mind, radiant presence, experience, mind, your mind, Zen, Mahamudra, Dzogchen, self, no self. These are words for the same thing. So Peter's like, it doesn't matter what happens. What matters is the phenomena of happening. Experiences themselves are experiences, but what's important is experience itself, not with an S, right? That's what's important. He said, this is what's always happening. Radiant presence is always happening. Come fucking check it out. And then he died. So, that was Peter's particular influence on my life. I didn't spend many years with him, but a couple of his students actually sit here. with us. And we have this continuous fixation on things that happen in time. Continuous fixation on where we need to go and what we need to do. And it's not that that isn't, I've discovered that there is a thing called destiny. There are things that are to be done in this incarnation, in your life. And if you don't walk through those doors, you will suffer. You will suffer a lot. So walk through them. When you have the sense you're supposed to go in that direction and you've been called to go in that direction and you got to give certain things up to go in that direction, the more you wait, the longer you resist, the more pain you will feel. There really is this hidden hand. There really is this guidance. All I'm saying is that guidance is still part of the dream. But nonetheless, it's there. From the perspective of the absolute that I'm talking about, where I'm saying it doesn't matter really what happens in time, because it's still this nature, this dream. Our fixations about doing X or doing Y or doing A or doing B. The human enterprise is a immortality project. We're animals. We're biological organisms, and we want to perpetuate our existence in time. And when you look at spirituality through that lens, it gives you a very different perspective. It's like, oh, what if this eternal witness thing, realization that we're seeking, is just part of the immortality project? What if it's just this incessant need to perpetuate ourselves and our minds into the future? These are important questions. So, with awakening, it becomes clear that this centerpiece, this personality, this I thing, this is what Buddhism points to as ignorance. That there is this individual self. When we look at self, when we look at me, what do we actually find? Like, this is part of the investigative aspect of yoga, of meditation. When I look for me, what is there? I find intention, so volition, one factor that generally is conceived as me. There is the shifting of attention, so you're able to focus on one thing, you're able to focus on another. There's memory. Memory is huge. If there was no memory, you would have no conception of self at all. Period. None. You have no idea who you are. Zero. So, memory, feeling, thinking, and thinking has many flavors, right? There's planning. So these particular factors, which are processes, they're not essences. You can't find them as solid things. They're these ephemeral wisps. How is someone sharing a screen right now? Okay. Someone muted me as well. I don't know how that just happened. All right. When you can't remember what you said, take it as a moment to be aware. Like, when that train you were on just stops, that train gets derailed, just just notice, just be aware. It's like it's a gate. It's a gate when what you were trying to say just disappears, and you're like, ah. So take moments of derailing to notice it, to be awake. Oh God, it's really gone. Damn it. All I remember is Immortality Project. And I know that was like 5 minutes ago, so that's pretty far back. Oh, okay. Memory, intention, attention, thought, feeling. Those are processes. We take those processes and we conceive them to be an entity. But when we actually look for the entity, we just find those processes. Those processes are not permanent. They're not these permanent essences. They're these ephemeral things, or these ephemeral formations that arise in the mind. Thought is this like pixelated imagery. Internal dialogue is, you can't find internal dialogue, you can only hear it, so this internal dialogue. Intention is also an invisible thing. Like, that it's there versus when it's absent, right? You're in stillness, you're in meditation. You can clearly experience the arising of intention and the vanishing of an intention. But an intention itself also is not it's invisible. Attention is invisible. Attention is really just the localization of consciousness. It's looking at something in particular. So attention is that capacity to direct oneself at what's arising, or at this or at that. Attention's also invisible. Feelings are invisible. So we take this nexus, this soup of invisible things, and we say, this is me, this is mine, this is myself. And that is why we suffer. So in the Buddhist teachings, the stages of awakening are measured by the falling away of certain mental obscurations. They're called fetters. And the final one that is wiped out, I think the two final ones are ignorance and conceit. So conceit is I, the sense of an I. When the I is completely vanished, there's no basis upon which to suffer. There's no basis upon which to attach to anything. There's no basis upon which to grieve. So I'm not an arhat, just telling all of you right off the bat. I may never depart from non-duality, but I definitely get frustrated here and there, especially with technology. Like, just please help me. I'm just trying to get this to be as fast as it's supposed to be. So, so most of our spirituality generally has to do with things that happen in time, but the truth is that time is appearing within your nature. Time is appearing within your mind. Time is appearing within experience. How do we know this? Because there are states of consciousness where there's no perception of time. In dreamless sleep, there's no time. If anyone here has ever experienced dreamless sleep, you did enough dream yoga or lucid dreaming to the point where you're able to sustain your lucidity as the dreamscape dissolves. And what happens when the dreamscape dissolves? Your personality breaks apart, and the mind appears as this luminous void. And in that void, there's no thinking, there's no self-referential awareness, there's no planning, there's no feeling, there's no mental images, and there's no capacity to talk to yourself, but you know that consciousness is present. That knowing is still there. After the experience, after you wake up, you recall that that state. And in that state, there wasn't time. So your mind, your nature appears as states that have time, or it appears as time, and then there's states where it appears as no time, the absence of time. So in my near death, for example, in that ocean of 10 billion suns, clear light, there was no, it was like the opposite of no time. It was like all time. It's eternity, right? So these configurations of experience, these configurations of consciousness are infinite, infinite, infinite. Every single room, you look to the left, your mind is appearing as this. You look forward, your mind is appearing as this. You look to the right, your mind is appearing as this. Look at all these. Look at this stuff. Like this is the textures of experience here. Okay, like the amount of variety is unbelievable. The amount of variety in reality is purely miraculous. So all that we're doing in our practice is orienting to this. Just noticing what is the case. I teach the 3-mode awareness. I teach lucid dreaming. I teach out-of-body experience, whatever. If you want to have mystical experiences, you have found the right person, I'm telling you, okay? But the fundamental point is that whatever happens, your presence, mind, experience is appearing as that. Whether it's mystical, whether it's ordinary. And the reason, although I teach how to do that, the reason that a lot of the non-dual teachings or teachers are like, don't, focus on that or whatever. One, it could be that they just don't have those experiences, so they can't talk about them. That's something to consider. Two, it's that it can capture your attention to the point where this absolute perspective I'm speaking about of inseparability of dreams and dreaming, inseparability of mind and experience, that can become overlooked by deep emphasis on these relative occurrences or mechanics of the dream. So the absolute is awakening from the dream, and the relative with all the different spiritual arts is investigation of the mechanics of the dream. How does this thing work? Like energy meridians, out-of-body experiences, different states of consciousness. This is all still the onion of experience. It's still all the dream of experience. And me personally, and many people, are interested in those mechanics. But the important thing is to still understand that they're dream mechanics. So, okay, I've talked a lot. Are there any questions? And then let's take questions for a bit, and then let's sit. So how the sits work is today we'll do a heart practice. So you'll all probably enjoy that. So what we'll do is I'll guide it. We'll just relax the body, and then we'll just feel the happiness from smiling. So you're going to smile in this meditation. And then you're just going to bring that smiling down to your chest. So you're going to feel like your chest is smiling. Okay? And with your chest smiling, then we're going to do the phrases from loving kindness. May all beings be happy. May all beings be safe. So the function of this is that when you tune into the heart, or when you experience any gate of stillness, the heart is one of the gates. It works very easily. The loving kindness and the joy of this type of meditation, it makes everything stop. Like the mind, the mental content, all of this, and the power of the loving kindness, it takes up most of your attention. So when most of your attention is on this one thing, and this one thing feels particularly good, there's less of this shifting into other modes or into other thoughts. It's still going to happen. Like, that's a given. It's still going to happen. Your attention's going to wander. That's fine. You just come back to smiling from the heart. And you can do the radiating the intentions as I say them, and then the rest of the time just rest in stillness. So we'll do this for like 20 minutes or so, and then we'll just sit in silence for the rest of the time. So it depends how long the questions go. If the questions are another 20 minutes, then we'll just sit for 40. And that'll be that. Anyone who wants to do the long sits, come to the Wednesday classes. So on Wednesday, I talk for an hour, and then we sit for 3 hours. I mean, literally. So I think last class, the discussion was longer, so we only sat, I think, for like two and a half, something like that. But generally, we'll sit for 3 hours. For me, I either sit or alternate sitting and walking. Or I just won't move until it's over. So, all right. If you have any questions, you can raise your hand. All right. Yeah, Laura? You're muted.
I know. Okay. So technologically. Oh my gosh. I have a question. When you had that experience with driving and you were one with everything and you were living your life for the 10 days, how did you live in the real world?
I didn't. Yeah, I showed up to work. I remember I was showing up to work, or I was at work, but during those 10 days, my left brain processing was inhibited. So I couldn't, I kept missing details on the loan documents, which is really bad. So my boss was like, "What is wrong with you? You keep missing details on the loan documents. We can't have this happening, man. I have to send it back to the underwriter, you know?" And I saw he was so mad, and I just saw the, like, I was like, oh, wow, like, his anger, like, he's only rich because he hated being poor. I have so much compassion for him. Like, he just hated being poor. That's the only reason he decided to get rich. So, yeah, no, functioning did not turn out too well. But after the 10 days, it toned down. So, but it's possible to function from those deep states of awakening. It's just that your attention has to be, you need to have strong mindfulness. You need to be able to direct your mind to do this and to, like, stay on track with that. And if that's not possible, then yeah, it may not be possible to function. It happens. I mean, I think I have a friend who sat with a teacher named Mark Griffin. He wasn't particularly famous or anything, but he's definitely realized. And he gave her a hug, and she said, like, she basically didn't get off a couch for a year.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and, like, the bills were stacking up and all of this, and it was a problem. But she was living with a boyfriend at the time, so he was able to take care of her to a degree. So that's rare. That doesn't happen to most people, but I mean, it happens. Like Eckhart Tolle is a perfect example. You know, he's just ended up on park benches and stuff. Yuji Krishnamurti as well, almost basically homeless. So it just depends on the person.
Yeah, because that was my first thought when it happened to me. I was like, how can I live in the real world? How do I live? How do I be normal in reality, in the sense of not our reality but theirs?
Yeah, you just gotta focus. You just gotta focus, like, you know, it's the disidentification of those awakenings can be so deep that there's really this sense that it's not possible to function in the dream. But all these Zen teachers, they're all the old ones. They're all great examples of people who were realized, but their functioning was very complete. You know, a lot of great teachers built huge temples, or they were artists, or they did incredible things. So it doesn't have to be the case that if you wake up you can't function. It's just that whatever state is realized, there is an adjustment period. So, and oftentimes this whole thing with retreat, it's actually a post-awakening phenomena. Like, you can go into retreat before an awakening happens, but a lot of times, like for example, if what happened to you happened in the context of a monastery or a spiritual community, the preceptor or the head nun or monk would just say, okay, go stay in this room, and food will be brought to you, and just keep meditating. Like, just let this stabilize. And if that takes a couple weeks or however long, that's just what it is. So the old cultures had containers for this kind of stuff, but our modern one doesn't. So it's just that's a thing to acknowledge.
And do you have any idea what brought you out of it, like into where you weren't so present in it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds like a funny story.
Yeah. I mean, so I had I remember calling my best friend, and I told him, I was like, hey man, it happened. And he's like, what happened? And in this call, I'm like talking into the phone, but the phone's myself, and I'm sitting in the car, and the car's myself, and I'm talking to him on the other line, and he's myself, and I'm just like, I became enlightened. and he was like, he's like, seriously? And I was like, yeah, it happened, man. And that ego stepping back in, like the whole thing just contracted, like that. Yeah. The next morning I woke up like it never happened. Yeah. As soon as I claim that state as mine, done. Yeah. Done. You get kicked out. You get God says, okay, now you're gonna learn. It's like this. So, there's all these good God analogies that I say. You know, mercilessness of the Lord, stuff like that. I'm not even Christian, by the way, but I read that stuff and it really, really resonates. So the Dark Night is like this. Like imagine we're at the ocean. I'm sticking your head in the water, and I'm drowning you. God is drowning you, and that's the Dark Night. You're like, oh, you know, you're just like barely holding on for your damn life. Pulls you out, lets you breathe. You're like, oh, then that's the bliss, you know? This whole like bliss, Dark Night roller coaster that some of you are on, you can see it like that. You're just being dunked in, pulled back out, get some air, dunk you back in, and then eventually you just like lose consciousness and your self vanishes, you know? You're just holding on for your dear life so you can't hold on anymore, and then deeper awakening happens. So that's what it is. So some of you that are in the abyss, you're getting the cosmic waterboarding, you know. Yeah, I know. I have very inappropriate sentiment and humor. I understand. For anyone who's a veteran or has actually endured things like that, I'm sorry. Very sorry for being so obscene. Okay, next question. Oh, Soldi? Sold? Are you able to unmute, or do I have... Yeah, you should be able to. Yeah. My mutes are not permanent. Oh, here, I'll do this. Okay, now you should see. Do you see the little thing? Okay, good.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Cool. Yeah, Solday is
Solday,
my
okay.
name. Thanks. So I'm wondering how I can reconcile, or what practices I